What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some more Pillars of Eternity and Avowed lore, and today we are talking about Saint Waidwen. So, if you're unaware, Saint Waidwen was used as a vessel by the god Eothas when Eothas first tried to enact his plan to teach the world that the gods weren't real. Now, with that out of the way, gonna be some big spoilers for both of the games here, so keep that in mind. Saint Waidwen was actually just a simple farmer born to devout Eothosian parents in the country of Red Saris. Red Saris is just north of the Deerwood, which is where the first game takes place. Basically, Waidwen's parents were devout followers of Eothas and that religion around that particular god. Now, Waidwen himself growing up often had doubts about the gods. Such as, if they're the ones doing the work, why are farmers thanking the gods for the work that the people did, that kind of thing. And his father, being a devout person, didn't care for this and was very abusive towards Waidwen. And unfortunately, this relationship never healed. Even on his father's deathbed, Waidwen's father, who never is actually named, but basically just refuses to accept his son and never apologizes for the way he was treated. So when his father died, it kind of set Waidwen free, so to speak. But after this happens, at some point when he was just walking back from his day of farming in the fields, Waidwen is spoken to by none other than Eothas himself. Now, some accounts actually say this was done by the Dawnstars, which are Eothas's avatars, if you will. Regardless, Eothas spoke to him directly, and basically offered Waidwen a choice to either continue being a farmer, or be given the opportunity to unite Red Saris and, show the world the truth. Obviously, Waidwen chose to become Eothas's vessel. Now, this is where he begins public speaking. So, according to Eothas, Red Saris was actually being punished for their lack of piety as well as their devotion to a corrupt governor at the time. So when Waidwen begins public speaking, he's often speaking out against these government institutions, but specifically this governor. So obviously this puts the governor in a bit of a spot once these public speakings actually start drawing a real crowd, because what Eothas is saying through Waidwen is drawing some real attention. So when the government actually, gets a hold of this and learns what's happening, they're obviously none too pleased. And what they do is they order Waidwen to be whipped publicly. He's stopped, if you will, in the middle of one of his speeches, and they order him to be lashed like 30 times. Now, interestingly enough, Waidwen just agrees to it, doesn't put up any protest. However, the mob of his followers tries to, but he assures them it's fine, and just submits to this punishment. Now, while this is happening, he doesn't make a single sound. But then, once the very last lashing goes out, he explodes into blinding light. Remember, Eothas is the god of light, which wraps Waidwen in a flaming crown of white light. At which point, the chains that are binding him at this point just fall off, and Waidwen, or more specifically Eothas through Waidwen, finishes his speech and just carries on. Now, this is the moment where Waidwen goes from being kind of a popular speaker to basically taking over Red Saris. So after this incident, people just flock to this dude's side. And very shortly after this, the governor of Red Saris is overthrown because basically it's die or leave and abdicate the throne, so to speak, of Red Saris. And at this point, Waidwen is named the Divine King of Red Saris. Now, initially, this goes very well, as you might imagine. People are very happy to have this living god as far as they're concerned for a king. But it goes south pretty quick, because if you remember, Eothas mentioned that Red Saris was being punished beforehand for their lack of piety. Well, basically, any religion that worshipped anybody besides Eothas was pushed out of Red Saris, if not just outright persecuted. Now, most of these religions eventually just started running for the Deerwood because they didn't want to be in Red Saris anymore, obviously. Now, this friction from all of these refugees leaving Red Saris into the Deerwood is actually what caused what's known as the Saints' War. Basically, the Deerwood was aware it couldn't possibly keep taking in these refugees because it just didn't have the means to support any of them, and they knew if they kept letting Waidwen just grow in power, it was going to be a problem later on down the line. So this is what actually sparks the Saints' War, which we hear about and is never actually seen, but it is the war between the Deerwood and Red Saris. Now, it's worth mentioning, the Deerwood did not win a single battle against Saint Waidwen before the battle that he died in. So prior to the first game, Waidwen dies at Halgot Citadel, which is later named Godhammer Citadel, I believe. But basically, having just being continuously beaten, the Dyrwood comes up with a plan. And it would seem this was at some degree to the urging of another god, Magrin, though through more subtle means than what Eothas was employing. But basically, 12 priests of Magrin, as well as people just knowledgeable about bombs and things in general, eventually make what's called the Godhammer bomb. It is a bomb magical in nature, but also tied to Waidwen's own soul through Magrin. She plucked a piece of his soul and managed to put it into the actual bomb. At this point, Waidwen was lured across the bridge that leads to Halgot Citadel. Now, with his soul being in the bomb, this was actually the trigger. Basically, Waidwen's proximity to the bomb is what set it off. And the bomb was hidden under the bridge that he was lured onto. So once he was on it, the bomb eventually exploded, seemingly killing Waidwen outright. Eothas just disappears for a while. Not even the other gods hear from him, until the second game, of course. Now, despite being the superior military force, at this point, Redceres basically just gives up and retreats, having basically seen their god king killed. That said, if they had actually pressed the forward nonetheless, they probably would have still won because of just how vastly superior Redceres' military is, which is pointed out in some of the lore bits here and there. But due to the morale situation, they were just pushed back anyway. Now, after this, the bit of a reverse situation happens where instead of every religion besides Eothas's being persecuted, Eothas's religion specifically is persecuted in the Dyrwood, and they all flee to Redceres. But more importantly, this is also the start of what is called Waidwen's Legacy, which ironically doesn't really have anything to do with Waidwen, but basically this is where the Hollowborn crisis from the first game starts, which is where Theos is actually activating old and Gwithan machinery to keep the children that are being born from getting souls as part of the reincarnation process in this universe. But because of the timing, people think this is because of what was done to Eothas and Waidwen. That's pretty much where St. Waidwen's story ends. This is pretty much everything there is to know about the guy, actually, from a variety of sources, from the guidebook from the first Pillars of Eternity, as well as in-game books, Adir, even some of the Beast of Winter DLC, where we can actually catch a bit of a glimpse of St. Waidwen. So there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.